And Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, my motion is that Council resolve to defer a decision on the demolition of the house to the applicant to supply a structural condition assessment and replacement building plans as required by policy 106 of the local planning policy Guildford Conservation Precinct. Record the reasons for changing the officer recommendation are that policy 106 local planning policy Guildford Conservation Precinct states on page 54 of policy 106 that applications for demolition, in addition to the information required to be provided for all applications outlined above, the following information shall be submitted with respect to applications for demolition. Please confirm this has been provided. Structural condition assessment, replacement building plans, archival recording. Note, the details required to be submitted as part of the above are outlined in subclause 6.3.2 of the local planning policy Guildford Conservation Precinct. The owner has not provided a structural condition assessment or replacement building plans as required. At section 6.3.2d of policy 106, it says, replacement building plans in case of demolition. Prior to approval of any demolition of any place in the conservation precinct, plans of the replacement building shall be submitted and approved by the city. The owner has not submitted plans of the replacement building. At section 6.1.2, the policy says that demolition is rarely appropriate and should be avoided wherever possible. Also at section 6.1.2, demolition shall not be expected simply because it is a more attractive economic position because the building has been neglected. 5. The house is a pre-1945 contributory building under the draft Guildford Heritage Area Planning Policy and as such will be protected from demolition by the planning policy. 6. The draft Guildford Heritage Area Planning Policy says at 8.1 that demolition will not be permitted where there has been a period of neglect leading to deterioration of the building's condition. 7. The owner has not supplied a heritage report or builder's report to support the need for demolition and in fact says the house has been extensively modified, which suggests it has been well maintained. 8. A family was living in the house until it was purchased by the current owners about 3 years ago, and this indicates that until recently it was in livable condition. It appears the only reason for demolition is economic. There are 30 objections to the demolition.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Richardson. Is there anyone against? I'm against, but I don't wish to debate the item, so I'm going to put it. Those in favour of the motion of Councillor Johnson? I have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Congdon, Councillor Parry, Councillor Knight, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Bowman and Councillor Prodovnik, which I believe is 9. Councillor Jones didn't put a hand up? Oh. Well, didn't put it up when I was looking at you, Councillor Jones. So, and Councillor Jones, which I believe is 10. The motion is carried. Did you get all those names, Megan?
And against?
Well, I was against. Councillor McCulloch was against. Councillor Zanino was against, which is 3, so it must have been 11-4. 11-3. Because Councillor Kiley's not here. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to the next item. Is item 4.12, retrospective clearing of native vegetation and proposed planning plan. It's on page 594. The reason this has been withdrawn is Councillor Bowman declared an indirect financial interest and he's required to leave his Zoom meeting or turn it off for the period, and then I'll be calling for a mover and a seconder of the item. Did you hear that, Councillor? So Councillor Bowman's leaving. I need a motion, councillors. Moved Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor Zanino. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried unanimously, and we can invite Councillor Bowman back to the meeting. Thank you. While Councillor Bowman's coming back online, the next item is item 4.14, existing service station associated signage on Kalamunda Road, South Guildford. It's on page 616. Councillor Prodovnik.
Okay, can everyone...
Yes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson. Is there anyone against? You may ask a question, Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. So this is of staff. Then this new motion means that all of those leach drains and soak wells are now going to be contained back onto within the boundary of that lot. Is that correct?
Mr Russell and Mr
With
Van
this
Linden.
motion?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll ask, is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried unanimously, which takes us to the next item, councillors, which is item 5.1, Balladura Intergenerational Play Space. It's on page 653. Councillor Parry, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just move up a bit closer. That Council resolved to, 1, proceed with the detailed design and construction of the Balladura Intergenerational Play Space at Oxley Drive in Balladura, and include the following embellishments identified during community consultation: A, change in northern entrance location; B, CCTV; C, minor water play elements; D, a rock climbing wall; 2, write a letter to the member of West Swan requesting funding for the construction of the Balladura Intergenerational Play Space; 3, write a letter to the Labor and Liberal candidates for the upcoming federal election for the Cowan electorate to request funding for the Balladura Intergenerational Play Space; 4, commence into construction of the project in the first quarter of 2023; 5, this project is to be included in the draft budget for 2022/23 budget; 6, advise submitters of the resolution; 7, record the reasons for changing the officer's recommendation are: 1, by constructing at Balladura Intergenerational Playground addresses the most significant issue raised in the Balladura Local Area Plan from 2020. 2, writing a letter to the member of West Swan allows the member to provide the same funding that was provided to Pierce Place in Whiteman Park of approximately $1.25 million. 3, this project has been on the City of Swan's advocacy list for the previous 3 years. By writing a letter to the Labor and Liberal candidates provides the candidates to advocate for greater funding for the project. 4, the construction of the project should be completed in the first quarter of the year, as that due to the work that is required, as the site requires the water table to be at the lowest point. 5, currently this project is not in our draft budget for 22/23 financial year. If the City of Swan has provided funding for the project from the federal or state government, the City of Swan should be in a position to ensure that we can act quickly.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Knight. Is there anyone against?
I have an amendment.
Yeah, got an amendment as well.
Hang on, I'll deal with the question first. Councillor Bowman, what's your question?
Just saying the mover and second would be happy to add on point 4, where it's commence construction of the project in the first quarter of 2023, subject to budget adoption and subject to paying grant funding.
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
Happy on the draft budget, Mr Mayor, but funding can also depend if the state government comes to us quickly. So if he's more than happy to accept the draft budget, more than happy to do that, but we're still waiting on advisement from Ms Affiotti if we can get any funding from the state, so not that particular point, no.
So agreed to the draft budget, Councillor Bowman, but was opposition to the state or perhaps federal funding. So are you happy with that, or do you wish to debate it?
Question?
Sorry, I'm trying to deal with Councillor Bowman, and we're having some communication issues. Did you hear what I said, Councillor Bowman?
Yeah, and I said I'll just have to speak against it now.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the motion, and I thought you said you had a question to ask, and that's why I took you first, because Councillor Congdon and Councillor Howard also indicated before you they had a amendment to the motion, but we're dealing with yours at the moment. So I've got it on the whiteboard as subject to budget adoption and grant funding. And one of those items was agreed to by the mover and the second, but the second one wasn't. So you've got 3 minutes to start your debate on your amendment. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, would not the mover of the motion speak first?
Yes, and before we get there, I'll seek a seconder to your amendment. Councillor Johnson.
So just to clarify what I'm saying to you, Mr Mayor, this is to add the words "and grant funding."
I just want to clarify that with Councillor Bowman.
Can I Just ask.
I asked the mover and seconder if they'd be happy to add it to it. They added part, they didn't add another part. So I haven't moved the amendment.
So, do you want to move an amendment or not, Councillor Bowman?
I'll be voting against it at the moment or speaking against it.
That's fine. You can do that. Okay, so there is no amendment for Councillor Bowman. Councillor Congdon, you're first. What's your amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mine is a very simple one. Just in
Let's get the amendment first.
Will I continue?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mine's a very simple one in number 1, that the word after Oxley Drive, they inserted the word parkland. A lot of our viewers online might consider this as going on to Oxley Drive, which is a road that goes from Illawarra through to Beach Road, and I just want to make sure that the parkland is included.
I accept that, Mr.
So there's no objection for the word parkland to go into the point 1, Councillor Parry or Councillor Knight. So that becomes part of the substantive motion. Councillor Howlett, you also said you had an amendment.
Yes, my amendment is in line with Councillor Bowman's, but my question is to the mover. In item 3, it states the upcoming federal election, yet you made reference to state funding. So is it state and federal funding?
So the major thing I'm raising is the fact that if you put grant funding in there, it doesn't clarify how much funding is required in regards to it. So the problem I've got is that if you've got federal funding for $2.5 million, then we can work through the draft budget accordingly. The problem we've got right now is we're in the middle of May. We're in the middle of April. We've got the federal budget in May. And then we've got our own budget in June. So what I was waiting for is the fact that we wait till we find out how much money we get from the federal or state government or federal government if either party gets it, and then we decide what we do with the federal with our City of Swan budget as well. That's the only reason why I'm against the grant funding in there, because of the fact of the timing of it. Of course, we can do budget adjustments and everything else afterwards, but the timing of it means that it needs to be in the draft budget now, and hopefully we can continue on advocating for it as well, like we did with the Belfin/Hepburn Ave, where we budgeted for 1.2 in our normal budget, and then we received the full complementary amount from the state government afterwards. So it's just a timing issue more than anything else for me. So that's the reason why.
So have you got an amendment, Councillor Howell?
No, my amendment would have been the same as Councillor Bowman's.
Thank you. So we've got an amendment which is now part of the substantive motion. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I've got an amendment, Mr Mayor.
What's your amendment?
It is that very amendment. Put a new line in there saying not to commence construction of the project until grant funding is available. Till after grant funding is available.
And what item is that?
I'd suggest putting it in after 4 and renumbering all the others.
Is that
and again, I reject that because of the fact
that it's not agreeable
yeah.
to the mover, the seconder.
Question for staff, if I may, through you, Mayor. If we didn't get the grant funding, could we begin work on the preliminary, the Soakwell side of it?
Yes. Well, if the money goes into the budget, yes.
If we are going to start construction in the first quarter, we will need to start design pretty well immediately, and we don't have any budget on in the current financial year or next financial year for the project at all. So we'll need money for design as well as construction.
So you're willing to accept the amendment, and the mover's not. So we'll go to debate. Yes, Councillor Catalano.
I'm just wondering though if how that works with clause 4. It might not work with clause 4, so it might not. You might need to be changed, because if it's going to the construction of the project, subject to budget, and what was that again? Subject to budget adoption and not commence construction. So it's slightly contradictory in that motion.
Perhaps we could roll down to the substantive motion where you've got that. So subject to budget adoption is point 4, and you'll note the grant funding is removed from that.
Yes.
And so the amendment, if we can now scroll back to Councillor Johnson, is not commence construction until after grant funding is provided.
So that means it won't commence in the first quarter of the...
Well, that's the amendment. We haven't discussed the amendment yet. So, Councillor Parry.
If someone is willing to put a minimum of $1.5 million as grant funding, I'm more than happy to do it, but I'm not willing to put grant funding as it is right now.
I want to get back to the amendment of Councillor Johnson. So, have you got a second to Councillor Johnson?
Got a further elaboration on it, if I may, Mr Mayor, before I get a seconder.
You what? Sorry, you want to?
Just to make a further change.
Well, it's your amendment. So once you move your amendment, I'm now going to call for a seconder. So what's your additional?
Okay, so I would suggest modifying section 4 to. I did hear a point of order there, so I better stop.
What's your point of order? Was it you, Councillor Bowman?
Yes, I was. I believe under means of local law, the mover and seconder to open debate before anyone else. And yet we're trying to get a seconder for an amendment, but I haven't even heard the opening from debate.
Ms Albrecht.
So councillors can move variations to motion before we open the debate, but in this case the councillor that moved the motion has indicated that they don't support the amendment, so normally you would open the debate for the substantive motion and then you would consider amendments as and when they arose.
Thank you. Well, that's what we'll do then. Councillor Parry, you've got 3 minutes to commence your debate.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Very simply, this is the number one issue raised in Ballagher in the local area plan last year, or in 2020. It's been on advocacy list for the last 3 years as well. This has been a number one issue raised on the local area plan. Construction needs to happen in the first quarter of 2023 because of the fact that, if councillors do not know, that particular area in Oxley Drive is a drainage basin, and we need to do the soak wells in the first half of the year or the first quarter of the year because otherwise the water table will be too high to do it. Also, the fact that we have a perfect time now in regards to the federal election as well to advocate further in regards to it through the Liberal and Labor candidates, Vince Connolly and Eileen. I think it's a perfect time we continue applying the pressure through the Deputy Mayor and the CEO to ensure that we receive the fundings. I'm not against an amount of grant funding required to commence the project, such as $1 million or 1.5. My issue is the wording of it means grant funding means it's fully funded by either the federal or state government, which I do have an issue because I believe that local government does have a responsibility to pay for parks and recreational activities like this as well. So I hope that councillors consider this to be one of the most important issues in Ballagher, and I hope you vote for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As the mover, Councillor Knight, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, just briefly, I think this park is a great idea. I think there's been a bit of scepticism in the community about its location, but it's a good dual purposing of this land. We're getting a drainage, a sump, a soak well in essence, and a playground on top. There's it's a good idea. There's plenty of parking on the weekends from the local businesses, so I hope that council will support this. It's much needed in Ballagher. Thank you.
Thank you. A speaker against?
Amendment.
Your amendment, Councillor Johnson. You'll be next, Councillor Bowman.
Yeah, thanks. I've had time to work on this now. So modify section 4 so that it reads, commence construction of the project no earlier than the first quarter of 2023.
Is that acceptable to the mover and seconder?
And the second part, there's another part to it. And a new part 5, renumbering everything else, not commence construction until grant funding has been approved.
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder? So the mover and the seconder are accepting of that, so that becomes part of the substantive motion. I'll just wait for the minute clerk to get that up on the board. Yeah, well, let's just get it on the board so we know what we're looking at. Mr CEO.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, just a clarification in the amendment when we talk about first quarter of 23, are we talking first quarter of calendar year or first quarter of financial year?
Calendar year.
So calendar year. So could we place that within the recommendation just for clarification?
Yeah. And just a quick, after grant funding is received, does that mean after if the federal or state government does provide funding, is that a proportion of it? Is that how you read it to Mr CEO? So let's say hypothetically the federal government provides $2 million. That's how you view it?
Yeah, either federal or state. So grant funding, literally, once some grant funding is
Just
been
want to make
received.
sure it's clear that's not all $4.6 million is required.
That's my intention.
Well, that's how it reads at the moment. Yes, that's how
That's how I interpret it too.
So I just want to confirm. So the amendment moved by Councillor Johnson is acceptable to both the mover and the seconder.
Yes.
That becomes part of the substantive motion. I'll ask now.
I have a question.
Councillor Catalano, you have a question?
Yes. How do we know in this motion that the city isn't going to end up paying for the whole $4 million or $4.5 million of play space?
Part 5 now covers that.
It says not commence construction until after grant funding has been received.
Okay, and how do we know what proportion of the total budget is going to be allocated in grant funding?
Well, I don't think we do know.
The issue is, Councillor Catalano, is the timing right now, because of the fact that's why it's under, I said, the draft budget of 22-23. I don't know how much Vince or Anne are going to fund for this, or Labor or Liberal Party are going to fund for this. I'm unable to tell that because I haven't released it, if they're going to fund it or anything else like that. I think it might be worthwhile if, when we go back to our budget sessions in June, then we can discuss this in full. I also note as well that if we do commence constructions of this project, the first portion is the drainage basin, which is...
I think you've answered the question, Councillor Parry.
And the second half can be done the next year.
Councillor Bowman.
I'm going to speak against only purely because I think recommendation 4 is ambiguous, and I think that may be what was being said, but unfortunately I was only getting every second word. I think the point there is design.
We've had
Not an issue with that.
Thank you. You want to start your debate now?
Can I make an amendment?
Well,
Who, me?
Councillor Bowman, do you wish to enter the debate and speak against the motion?
Well, yep, if I have to now. I'm sorry, I'm only picking up every second thing because there's much more than one mic on.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes to have your debate. Thank you.
Was that me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, my amendment is go back up to, is it 5 or is it 4? Not commence, that's 5, not commence construction until after up to half of, until grant funding to the value of half the cost of the project.
I don't know if I can accept that.
Has been received.
I don't know if I can accept that because I don't know what the project cost will be because it hadn't been designed yet. Mr Coaten, if you can assist.
Oh, there is an estimate of 4.6 million, which is based on the concept design. It will be in that order of magnitude, maybe more or less, but around that generally.
See if that's acceptable to the mover and the seconder, or it isn't. Do you wish to debate it, Councillor Catalano? Have you got a seconder?
Yes, I do wish to. Yes.
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Howlett, you have 3 minutes to debate your amendment.
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, I mean, we've had some discussion in meetings about the budget, and actually it was really, I think it was the first time that the figures and the idea of how much it would cost and the projected grant that was money that would be applied for was first talked about, and it seemed quite a lot of money for the city to even be putting, let's say $2.5 million towards this play space. I mean, I do accept it's needed, and I do really appreciate that it's needed. We need these play spaces everywhere, but $4.65 million is just too much for all of the ratepayers in the City of Swan to have to foot the bill for. So this motion so far, without that 50%, without defining or itemising that the project costs will only be met to the tune of 50% by the city ratepayers, and then that extra 50% will need to be sought from either the federal or the state government. Just makes it very clear that we're not going to end up down the track having to, as Councillor Bowman said, put in everything but $100,000 or something that we might receive in grant funding. And I think it's just that we've got to be prudent. We've got a lot of costs. We've got a very tight budget next year, and we're going to have tight budgets for the forthcoming years. And
you have 1 minute left.
This is actually a very expensive project, so we really need to make sure that we get some serious advocacy happening to get that 50% grant funding, which is to the tune of $2 million or $2.25 million thereabouts, as it's costed at the moment. And then that will be up to ratepayers throughout the City of Swan then to pick up the tab, and I think that's very reasonable. That's a reasonable compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell, as the seconder.
Thank you. I also I fully support this play space, but this motion pushes us to be more aggressive in pursuing funding from the government. As a growth council, we can't do everything. We can't grow, and we can't look after the amenity of our existing established suburbs. We can't do it all. So what suffers is the amenity in our existing established suburbs. So if we're going to continue to grow, which we must do, the government must come and help us look after our residents and ratepayers that have got that need enhancement. They've got older infrastructure. They need new play spaces. So I think this motion pushes us to be more aggressive to chase that funding.
Thank you. Speaker against the amendment, Councillor Parry.
Can you go? Sorry, Megan. Can you go off screen, thanks? I wish to remind councillors, if you go to point 4, subject to budget adoption, which means that we have the right to fund however we want in June when we get it back out, is that with project it's 4.6, grant funding is 2 whatever it is, loans are 2 million, and the municipal funds is $300,000. Anything else can be subject to budget adjustments. We can change this after the fact, councillors. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. If we don't have the money, we'll have to discuss later down budget adjustments or other things we can do as well. And councillors, I wish to reiterate the point in regards to building this in the first quarter. It's simply because it needs to be built in summer. If you delay it, hypothetically, and as Mr. Coden's nodding his head right now, he's basically what happens is that if you build it in July, August, September, when we hypothetically receive the 50% funding, what happens? We're middle in a drainage basin, which means if you've ever been to Oxley Drive, and Councillor Congdon will agree with me, it's waterlogged. It's got mils of water basically filled up in the middle of it as well. So the only time you can actually do this is actually the first quarter. We can change this all later, councillors. It's not fixed or anything else like that. If we need to move some funds in the next draft budget as well, I'm more than happy to do that. This is a long-term project and there's huge lead items as well, councillors. You can't expect playground equipment to be built in this current climate within 36 weeks to 52 weeks as well. There's another budget round to come afterwards. So you're basically going to hamstring us. So just slow down a little bit. So there's two segments to this work. One is the drainage works and one is the play space works. If we can't do the drainage work straight away, councillors, it's going to cost us a lot more money. Okay? So we need to do that in the quarter one, and we need to do it as early as we can. Hence why I don't want to put a limit of 50% there. We can work with Miss Safiotti or next year or something like that. We can work with Vince and Anne as well.
Yeah, 1 minute left, thank you.
In the upcoming period as well. I just don't want to limit it. That's all I'm caring about right now, because we need to do it in the first quarter of 2023 to save money, which is quite ironic because what you're basically saying is that we have to put 50% on it now. It actually makes no sense. So I can't support it, Councillor Catalano, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Speaker for the amendment. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah,
3 minutes.
thanks, Mr Mayor. A lot of the points that are being raised here are ones that I considered when I put my amendment forward, which of course I'm indebted to Councillor Bowman for coming up with the concept. What's happening here, councillors, is that Councillor Catalano is just pushing it a little bit further, which I think is a good idea. The reason I changed the original, put up the reason for my original motion to talk about commencing construction no earlier than the day given was to cover the issues that have been raised by the councillor. However, when it came to not commence construction until grant funding has been approved, I actually wrote there some, but I thought councillors would find that silly. So what Councillor Castellano is doing is turning the word some into a more acceptable criteria. So I think it's worth considering what level of grant funding is acceptable. So I think Councillor Catalano's amendment provides a sort of a useful facility for councillors to determine if there's an appropriate criteria for the amount of grant funding. So that's why I'm supporting it. In the event the amendment fails, then there will need to be grant funding. So I'm supporting the motion because I actually think 50% is a good idea.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's interesting, the commentary around the room about let's go and put a figure on what we expect anyone from left or right in the federal arena to apply to this project. There are a couple of things in the recommendation, and number 6 is probably the most prudent. It says this project is to be included in the draft 22-23 budget. So it's got another hurdle to go through in respect of this. Now, we should know exactly where we are by the end of May, after the federal election is closed and we know who the winners are, and what contribution either party are willing to commit to this project. The interesting thing is there doesn't seem to be any issue with punching in $20 or $30 million into an Ellenbrook pool. There doesn't seem to be any problem in punching tens of millions of dollars into Stock Road. There doesn't seem to be any problem punching money into the Charlie Gregorini Park. There's no end of money being spent.
What's your point of order, Councillor Bowman?
We're not talking about Ellenbrook Pool, we're not talking about Stock Road, we're talking about Bellagio generation.
Yes, rule you have no point of order. Councillor Congdon's using it as comparison. Thank you. Continue, Councillor Congdon.
And I think there was a couple of triggers being put in here, which says it's in the draft budget, and the other one is nothing will commence until we get some grant funding. I think it was if our federal members are listening online and saying, well, the City of Swan want to pressure us into delivering X amount of dollars in terms of grant funding, well, maybe we might just rethink where we are with this, because I don't think that any member of government should be placed under pressure to deliver anything because we have a council that says we want 50%. Now, what if they come up with 40%? What do we do then? What if they come up with 45%? What do we do then? What if they come up with 49%? What do we do then?
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that the triggers that we've got that says, no, you can't proceed with this, have already been accepted by the mover in the sector, or are now become part of the motion, and they are the ones, with the exception of this current amendment, they're the ones we should be looking at and then proceeding forward.
Thank you. Speaker for the amendment, Councillor Bowman. Yes, Councillor Bowman, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just quickly, there's $2.3 million in the draft budget, and this project is 4.6.
Point of order, Mr Mayor, that's not correct. There's no money in the draft budget yet, so he's got to be careful.
Did you hear that, Councillor Bowman?
Didn't hear a word of it.
I'm advised that there is no money in the draft budget at this stage.
So is that a point of order or just an opinion?
No, it was a point of order. I'll just ask Mr Coaten to clarify it. Thank you, Mr Coaten.
Yeah, that's correct. There isn't any money on the budget for this project at all.
So at the moment there's no money on the draft budget, so I accept the point of order. If you can continue debate, Councillor Bowman, there is no amount.
In budget discussions on Monday, a figure of $2.3 million was suggested to be added to the draft budget for consideration of this item. 2.3 million is 50%. I think no one has a problem with the drainage work commencing. I don't think anyone has a problem with the design commencing. But the issue is, if there's no grant funding comes available, do we build half a playground and then we go, oh, we can only build half and then we need more money? To me, that's not good financial responsibility. I don't actually personally like the wording of this amendment. However, my concerns previously weren't addressed, so this goes close to what it can be.
Thank you. Speaker for the amendment. Any other speakers for or against the amendment? And Councillor Catalano, you've got 3 minutes for a right of reply. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's just about clearing up this issue about how much the city is going to be expected to put towards the playground, and we've heard about this figure of 2.3 million that may or may not be allocated in the draft budget for the forthcoming year. Yes, that's exactly right. It may or it may not. That's right. That's the problem. So we don't know, and that's why we're getting some definition around how much the city is going to put into this project. Now, I don't consider this as being any way pressuring any state or federal government to trump up with the money, because actually the pressure is on us to get the money and to advocate strongly for the money, and I'm sure that the council will be able to do that. So there's no pressure. It's not a signal to any of the government departments that this has to be done. This is a signal to ourselves that this has to be done. And the reason why it has to be done is, yes, we cannot start a project and go gangbusters and then go, oh, whoops, guess what? We haven't got the grant funding that we expected we would get 12 months ago. And I'm talking about in the future, 12 months in the future when we start this project, according to this motion. Oops, we haven't got the money. Well, we're just going to go ahead with it anyway, and we'll somehow have to find $2.3 million on top of the $2.3 million that's allocated in the budget, if indeed it is allocated in this forthcoming year's budget. So then it'll be, oh, what are we going to do? We've got a half done. What are we going to do? Exactly. And then the pressure will be on us to actually find...
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
...that $2.3 million and take it then from money, funds, ratepayer funds, that should be spent in other suburbs that desperately also need facilities and services and landscaping and streetscaping and playgrounds and Eltone being no exception. I mean, so we don't have a all abilities play space either. So, just basic streetscapes would be there'd be money taken away from those kind of basic services. So I'm just trying to put some parameters around exactly how much the city is going to be putting to this project, and then the other half will have to be, it's going to have to be obtained through grant funding. I think that is what we have agreed. So this is just to make sure that we have agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. That's your 3 minutes of reply. I'm now putting the amendment, councillors. Those councillors in favour of the amendment. I have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Bowman. That is 4. The amendment fails. We are now back to the substantive motion. Are there any other speakers for or against, councillors? Councillor Congdon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mine is for the motion. Councillors, there are probably not a lot of councillors in this room that understand where Ballajura was almost 35 years ago. Sadly, we were landed with a suburb of public open space, not in the 10% realm as been seen through other localities of the city of Swan. We had a massive lake put in place, which is a big drainage basin, referred to as a lake, and that was calculated into the public open space. Well, you can't play footy on it, you can't play cricket on it, you can't go swimming in it. The best you can do is row your boat, and if you're lucky you might be able to catch a koi. A lot of the balance of the other open space areas, other than the Kingfisher Oval and the Parkview and a few others, were drainage basins, which in part you can't use in winter at all because of the depth of the water that is in the drainage basins and the undulation of what consists within those drainage basin areas. Our population of Ballajura, some 20,000, have been asking for a proper play space for as long as I can remember, and I've been engaged in Ballajura in community services for well over 20 years. And this is the reason why this has come to where it is today, because it's probably the first time we've ever been in a position through our residents advocating for this to happen in Ballajura. So understanding where we are with the funding mech of this, as I said earlier, if it's in the draft budget, it hasn't been accepted yet because it's in the draft budget. There's some triggers that says if you don't get funding, then you can't start a commencement. Our community is expecting this to take place, and I think our federal members fully understand that our community expect this to take place. Now, there was a discussion earlier about the consultation. There are some people against this. Yes, there were. The minority of people against this were more concerned about access to the road.
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
Thank you. Access to the road and the safety of their children, not so much about advocating for the park. All those issues have been resolved by the engineers of fencing, access, parking on that large stretch of land that goes from Oxley Drive all the way down to Cassowary and borders Illawarra. Our community expect it to be built. I'm hopeful that the funding that will come from our federal members in some way or another, and we will pick up maybe a proportion of what the overall cost is. So I urge you to support this. Thank you.
Speaker against the motion? Any other speakers for or against? Then your right to reply. Thank you. Councillor Parry, you have 3 minutes.
I won't take very long, Mr Mayor. One of the reasons why I came onto council was to do this very project itself. I've got 3 young kids, 11, 9 and 7. And as I said to Mel when we first decided to run, and sorry, I'm not, but I said to him, I want a good park in Ballajura, and it's time that we had that. It's very simple, councillors. What you're doing now is create a next step for our children in Ballajura to have something suitable so they don't have to travel to Naranda or Kingsley every time to have a birthday party. Every time they can have kick of the footy as well, not just Kingfisher as well. This is an important vote, not only for me, but also all the P&Cs and Balladura, all the parents, everybody else in that community. They want it badly, and that's why we should push forward with this. So I ask for your vote, not only as a councillor, but also as a father of 3 young children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion. Perhaps I'll just ask for it to be put on the board just to cover those amendments so everyone's 100% clear on what the final motion is. Just if we could put up the motion for a few seconds, go to those items which were amended. Thank you. Now we go back to the live stream so I can see Councillor Bowman and Councillor Podovnik. Those in favour of the motion, I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Podovnik and Councillor Bowman. I believe that's 13 and 1 against, Councillor Catalano. The motion is passed. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to the next item, which is item 5.2, South Guildford Replacement BMX Track on page 683. Councillor Podovnik, thank you.
Okay, the motion is that Council resolve to defer the decision on the replacement BMX track location to a future ordinary council meeting following receipt of Main Road WA's designs for the grade separated intersection. The reason is 1, Greater Connect Alliance has been engaged by Main Roads to do the planning for the proposed new interchange at Kalamunda Road and Great Eastern Highway bypass, and they say it's too early to determine the impact on the BMX track or confirm future access arrangements or changes to Barker Road and or Queens Road. 2, we are unable to confirm if location 3 is suitable until we have Main Roads WA's designs. 3, a deferral will allow more time to find out what Main Roads' intentions are and therefore the impact to the area.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Howlett. Is there anyone against? Question. Councillor Richardson.
How long would this deferral be for approximately?
Mr Coaten, can you give any advice on that regards? Do we know how long Main Roads or Greater
We are, and from memory I think we're expecting to get a reply in August. It is actually in the report, but I'm pretty sure it's August. But yeah, it's definitely in the report, and I think it was August, but I can't put my finger on it at the moment.
Thank you. Any other questions before I ask? Anyone else against? Or anyone against?
Got a question.
Question, Councillor Johnson.
So if the staff are recommending this location and then and we approve the location and then Main Roads WA come along and say, oh, unfortunately your location is not suitable, what happens then?
Well, the motion is to defer a decision on the location until after we get the reports back from Main Roads and the design.
But the question is, does it make any difference? Because we choose a location and then Main Roads WA choose a different come up with a different design that means it's not suitable. It just means we change the location again.
Well, I think if we choose a location, Councillor Johnson, and we start any sort of design or construction and it's not suitable to Main Roads, we've wasted that time, effort and money. That's how I see it.
So I guess I've got another question then, through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Coaten. Why didn't the staff think of that, Mr Coaten?
What? Sorry, was the question why didn't the staff think of that?
Yeah, just deferring
I don't know. I don't know why we didn't think of it, but I do know why we recommended what we did on the basis that if the location 3 is the preferred location, and so that's the one to go to. But if Main Roads say no, then go get council to agree to another location. So the main difference between this option and the alternative is that this option makes a decision on the alternative location now, as opposed to coming back to a future meeting of council.
Yes, I'm opposed to it.
You wish to debate it?
It's a good idea.
Thank you, Councillor Brodovnik, you've got 3 minutes to open your debate. Thank you.
This motion supports option 2 in the report to Council, which is to defer the decision on the BMX track location to a future ordinary meeting of Council, and for that location decision to be made after we get the designs for the intersection from Main Roads WA. We really can't do much until we have this information from Main Roads, so it just makes sense to wait until we have a clearer idea about what's happening to that intersection. There's 3 proposed locations, and any of these 3 might be impacted or not, depending on the design. Even the current location might not be adversely impacted. So deferring this decision until we have the designs from Main Roads will help us get the full picture and give us a clearer understanding what our options are. Please support this deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Howard is the seconder.
Thank you. I'll be brief. This BMX track received fantastic consultation through the community submission time. There was 161 submissions. And what came out of that consultation was this third option. So it was put forward by the community. I think we should be, we shouldn't approve it until we've investigated it, as we have done the other 2 options. So it makes sense. Supporting Councillor Prodovnik's motion allows the city to explore this third option to make sure that it aligns with all the road plans that are expected in that area. So I urge you to support it.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, simple reason is this, Mr Mayor. If we decide on this location, when Mr Coaten goes to Main Roads WA, he's got a firm position. He can say to Main Roads WA, look, the community want and the council want to put the new BMX track in this location. Does that change your plans? So it's just firming things up, making it a bit clearer what our intentions are. So it's very clear what the community want. It's great that they they've come up with this location. I think we need to put that fairly forcefully to Main Roads WA. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Question, Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. To staff, I mean, how is this intersection going to affect the track? I mean, it appears to be absolutely nowhere near the intersection. And is it and the land that it's on, is that City of Swan owned? Who owns the land?
I do have the land tenures somewhere here. It might take me a while to find it, so I may not be able to answer that question. But in relation to the impact of the design, we don't know the answer to that. So there's going to be grade separation at that intersection of the bypass and Kalamunda Road. So we're not sure of the extent of the impact on the existing location or the location 3.
Just a further question. You're talking about the intersection that's down there in the left-hand corner of the photographs. Is that the one you're talking about there in the left-hand corner of the photographs? Yes. So, I mean, are you saying that it's potentially, or there's a potential for Main Roads to basically appropriate that land that we don't know who owns, but is it? I mean, I suppose it depends. Would they want to appropriate that land?
This motion will find that out.
Oh, so we don't have that. We don't have that information so far.
Well, the Main Roads may require land for the grade separation project. I don't have the information to hand on the land tenure in there.
Speaker for or against the motion, councillors? No other speakers. You've got a right to reply of 3 minutes. Thank you, Councillor Brodovnik.
I'll keep this very brief. The questions tonight simply highlight how much information we don't have at this stage, and a deferral really is going to give us an opportunity to get more information so we can make an informed choice and have a really clear understanding of what our options are, if it's location 1, 2, 3, or even if we don't even need to move from the current site. So please just, I'm asking Council to please just support this deferral. It's common sense in my view.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion. Those in favour? of Councillor Jones, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Bowman. That is 13. One against Councillor Catalano. The motion is carried. Sorry. Councillor Johnson was against, and he is the only one. Thank you. My apologies, councillors. That takes us to item 5.3, and councillors, I'm looking for a mover of a recommendation.
This is what he indicated.
Yeah. Councillor Bowman, you're moving the officer's recommendation, is that correct?
I am.
Thank you. A seconder?
Yep.
Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Takes us on to item 5.7. Councillor Henderson. This is the provision of cleaning services, City of Swan facilities, Midland Place and Gidgee Gannets on page 761. Councillors.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd be moving an alternate, which means we'd need to do this behind closed doors.
Only if it's going to be debated. Is there anyone going to be against? You will be, Councillor Howlett, so thank you. We're going to move it to the confidential areas. You're moving to go behind closed doors now, Councillor Parry. Seconded, Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declared that carried, that we move behind doors. Can we make sure that the public are out of thank you. Welcome back to the council meeting, everyone. We've now come out from behind closed doors, and I'll read the summary of decisions from the motions dealt with behind closed doors. In relation to item 5.7, provision of cleaning services, Midland and Gidgee Gannett, Council has resolved to select GJK Cleaning Services Proprietary Limited as the preferred tenderer. In item C 3.1, Community Care Services, the resolution is to keep this decision confidential, which will be communicated with relevant stakeholders. Item C 3.2, One Council Mid-Term Project Review, resolved to accept the mid-year project review. Item C 3.3, taking of consent portion of lot 1000 Stock Road, Bullsbrook. Council resolved to accept the request for an advance payment in order to agree to ask the taking of consent by agreement. In relation to item C 3.4, taking of consent portion of lot 43 Stock Road, Bullsbrook, Council resolved to accept the request for an advance payment in order to agree to enter into taking of consent by agreement. And item C 3.6, compulsory acquisition of lot 2 Adelaide Street, Hazelmere, corner of Stirling Crescent, upgrade. Council resolved to keep the item confidential to enable the relevant landowner to be notified. Thank you. We'll now commence back on the normal schedule, and the first item we'll recommence on is item 5.8, petition response, street modification proposed to Lena Street, Guildford. It's on page 767. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, my motion is that Council resolve to note that the implementation of a safe, active streets programme, including Helena Street as a potential trial site, will be presented to Council at a future briefing. 2, to invite the residents of Helena Street and Market Street, Guildford, to either attend the Council briefing on the Safe Active Streets programme or to arrange a separate briefing on the programme for the residents. The arrangements to be at the discretion of the CEO. 3, note the request for retiming of the traffic lights at the intersection of Johnson Street and James Street has already been supported by Council and has been forwarded to Main Roads WA. 4, note that the Council has previously determined not to support the extension of the left turn from Johnson Street into James Street. 5, advise the petitioner accordingly. 6, record the reason for changing the officer recommendation is that the residents of Helena Street and Market Street are interested in the resolution of the traffic problems in their streets through the Safe Active Streets programme.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Howlett. Is there anyone against? No one against. I declare it carried unanimously. Takes us to the next item, councillors. Item 6.3, budget adjustments 2021 to 22 in April 2022. It's on page 816. First, you'll note, councillor, there's a correction to item 37 with a couple of paragraphs there, and the Pacific page reference was 822 and 823. This item's been withdrawn as there are some questions, I believe. Was that you, Councillor Bowman?
I want to speak against it.
Thank you. Well, first I'll need a mover and a second of the officer's recommendation. Move Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor Congdon, and you wish to speak against it, Councillor Bowman?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Councillor Parry, you don't wish to enter the debate at this time. Councillor Congdon is the seconder.
Not for me either, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, you've got 3 minutes for your debate. Thank you.
Councillors, I cannot support this item and it's been built up for the last 6 months. Councillors, we're amending budgets after the fact. Item 7 has eroded the classic example. Council staff constantly going over budget items and then after the fact we're approving adjustments. This should not be occurring. Why do we have so many budget adjustments? Not only do we do this every month, but this month we have 182 adjustments. Council, the reason I've been provided before is with the largest metro local government, and let's remember this is by land mass only, and we have the biggest capital budget. Councillors, ask yourself the question, what does the biggest 3 local governments do? And I'm referring to doing like Wanneroo and Still.
I've lost your microphone.
And they complete just as much as their capital programs, if not more than us. Councillors, sorry?
We're having trouble hearing you, Councillor Bowman. You keep dropping in and out for 5-6 seconds at a time.
That sounds like what's been happening for me for the whole thing. So, do I start again or what?
Can I suggest that you might turn the video off and just do through the speaker? It might make it easier for the signal come through.
Okay, is that better?
For now. Keep going, thank you.
Do I keep going or you want me to start again?
No, if you keep going.
Okay. Councillors, why are we for $180 million local government undertaking budget adjustments as low as $88? When I previously asked about 1,000 adjustments, I was informed this was rare. I now disagree with that advice previously received, as anyone can see the number of budget adjustments in items under $1,000. Councillors, why are we accepting items 57 to 77? All tiny amounts to try and beef up the stakeholder engagement and restructure budget. Surely this would have been a consideration when it was approved. If not, did council make a decision without having the financial funds available? This is not just limited to these items, as many other items are also for restructure. Just to put it in perspective, and I dare not say all, but the vast majority of small country local governments with total budgets of no more than $5 or $6 million don't think with the budget with figures this low. Councillors, why are we okay with getting little information for large budget adjustments? I find it interesting that we're only given the GL job numbers.
I don't know if you can hear me, Councillor Bowman. You've dropped right off again. And last, the GL numbers. We'll just see if we can get him reconnected. Thank you. Are you there, Councillor Bowman?
Yeah, Aaron, it's Mel. You're not in with us until the internet connection's lost? No. Yeah. Can I put him on loudspeaker?
Yes, please.
He's there now.
Aaron, we'll put you on my loudspeaker, and then that'll come through the chamber, yeah? Okay, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. The last part we heard is when you mentioned all you get is a GL job number.
Sorry, I'm having... I can't see the chamber either, Aaron. You and I both can't see the chamber, can we? Okay, so I'm hearing from Councillor Prodovnik because I can hear her. So we're talking to each other, but she can't hear the chamber either. I can hear the chamber, but I can't see them.
Well, we can hear you, Aaron.
Not necessary to see us, as long as you can hear.
Where was the last? Was that GL job numbers?
GL job numbers, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I find it interesting that we aren't given the GL job numbers yet. Last month's council meeting, when I referenced only a GL account, the administrator added, without reference to me, what the account was, which was the Midland Library. Councillors, this is should be managing their budgets. Councillors, this should not be acceptable to us. Councillors, is not acceptable to me, and I will not and cannot support what, in my opinion, is an inappropriate practice for managing the city's budget. It's time to make the change.
Thank you. Is that the end of your debate?
You've got to turn you on. Oh, he's left. I've lost him.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against the motion, councillors? Councillor Parry, thank you. There's no other debate. We've got the officer's recommendation moved by Councillor Parry, seconded by Councillor...
Sorry, do I get Councillor Bowman back online?
Well,
No, can hear now.
Are you there, Councillor Bowman? Yes. There's no further debate after yours. I'm now going to put the officer's recommendation to the council. Those in favour? I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor McCulloch and Councillor Prodovnik. That's 9. The motion is passed, 9-5. Did you get all those names? Thank you, Megan. Or Amanda, did you get the names? You want them again? The against were Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight, Councillor Richardson and Councillor Bowman. 9-5. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to the next item, which is item 7.1, proposed local law parking. It's on page 845. Councillor Bowman, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I won't read the whole thing, but it's just a change to recommendation 1, proposed to make attached to this one parking local laws subject to the following amendments: increase modified penalties in Schedule 1 prescribed offence by 50%, i.e. the $80 become 120, the 120 will become 180, and the 300 will come to 450.
Thank you. Do I have a second to councillors? Councillor Henderson, is there anyone against?
Yep.
Do you wish to debate it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes for your debate. Thank you, Councillor Bowman.
Yeah. Councillors, I expect you would all like me to get numerous complaints regarding parking issues throughout the city. Councillors, proposed parking law will strengthen the ability of staff to better deal with those that constantly park without any care or consideration for others, and who don't care if they block their neighbours from entering their properties, or they will use they can do whatever they want to parking dangerously in the mean street. Councillors, My amendment is to increase the penalty amount by 50%. This will not impact 99.9% of our residents and ratepayers, as they do the right thing. But for those that are not, then the extra amount is warranted. Councillors, reviewing penalty amounts and getting them changed is the same process as doing a complete review of the local law. And having reviewed numerous local laws in my career, I know how much work is required, and therefore in reality it won't happen for at least another 8 years, at which time the penalty amounts will be extremely low. Even with the 50% increase, we are not the highest amongst local government.
I have a question.
You finished your debate, Councillor Bowman?
Yep.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Podovnik.
Just on this one, it doesn't seem to be in the motion, but are we affording people a warning before we sort of hit them with a 50% increase? Is there an option to do that?
It's not in the amendment, so I'd say not in the motion, so no. It's when infringement's going to be issued, the penalty would be increased by 50%.
Can I just ask then, what's our process? Do we normally just issue a warning first?
Sometimes warnings are issued, particularly around school zones in the first 1 or 2 terms, and then infringements are issued after the first 2 terms are an educational process. But it depends where the person's parked, Councillor Podovnik.
Then can I propose an amendment to make that really clear that they get a warning in the first instance? I mean, I'm not disputing the fact that the rising fines is probably a good idea, but it would be good to give them a warning.
Yeah, I've got a comment from the CEO. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. I mean, this proposed local law is going out for advertising, so we'll seek comments on that. But Councillor Podovnik's questions, the community safety advocates have a whole raft of different methods and strategies in terms of educating people. Enforcement is always a last resort, and we would go through a series of processes, being cautions, education, and then modified penalties. But it's an operational decision, Mr Mayor, in terms of whether the Rangers issue those penalties.
Thank you. Does that clarify it, Councillor Podovnik? Councillor Howlett, you also had a question?
I do. I'm just wondering, through you, Mr Mayor, to the staff, what percentage of parking fines don't get paid, and what are the costs involved in chasing up those unpaid fines?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I mean, we wouldn't have that information to hand, but I'm more than happy to go to the Community Safety Unit and gather some of that information to distribute for councillors.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, just to carry on from Councillor Howlett's question, if somebody fails to pay a city fine, is it processed through the fines enforcement registry system? Yep. So there's no escaping the fines.
Okay. Councillor Henderson as a seconder. Do you wish to debate?
Briefly, councillors. Councillor Bowman's absolutely dead right. This is about a local law. It takes ages to get this stuff happening. Inflation effectively dilutes these amounts very quickly, and really he's taken the initiative to get in front of that. I think these amounts are necessary to bring people into line after all of those processes have gone through that the CEO has just discussed. So I actually think they're quite reasonable, and given the fact that sometimes the only way you can get a result is by issuing a fine, and it's got to be of a value that makes them stand up and think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Congdon.
I'd hate to be the poor mum, councillors, that got hit with a $450 fine. I think the $300 fine that's in the proposal here is more than adequate to go out for advertising, but to move it up to $450 at the top end from 120 to 180, some people do silly things with cars and when they park and do strange stuff. Some do it under duress, and I just think that we're looking at imposing a huge amount. We spoke earlier in the week in the budget session about adopting either a zero rate or whatever it may be. This is a huge jump from 300 to 450. that perhaps there's some area where you could have advanced it a bit further by 20 or 25%, but 50%, it's huge. I can't support that.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I too was thinking along the same lines as Councillor Congleton. What exactly would one have to do to get a $450 fine? And initially you would think, oh dear, we couldn't have some mum accidentally getting fined $450. So I've just had a quick look. Schedule 1, prescribed offences, page 907, I think it is. 2.6, use of counterfeit or altered parking ticket. That's not something you can do accidentally or through mistake when you're a sort of a rushed young mum. That's a very intentional thing, and I think that's why $450 would be appropriate. Parking in thoroughfare or parking facility for purpose of operating a business without approval. I don't think a young mum would accidentally do that either. I think there's another one here. Stop heavy or long vehicle on carriageway. Again, that's would be a commercial business. I don't think a young mum would be doing that. And the other one is, again, another use of a counterfeit or altered parking permit. So I think in those cases, $450 is quite justified. So I think I can support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Prodovnik first.
Yeah, look, I think we don't need to hike it up by 50%. I think that's really high. A fine is always a deterrent. It doesn't matter how small the fine is. It's always a deterrent. People don't like to pay fines. If you get pinged, you're going to remember it. And again, we don't have to hike it up this high. I really think it's excessive. Please don't support this. I just think it's too excessive, and it just, in this post-COVID era as well, I just think people are very sensitive to cost, and we don't need to take this step.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. I'm not against putting increasing the penalties, but there's a dual responsibility. The city is responsible to make it known to the people that they can't park where they're parking. I recently received a parking ticket because I parked within a metre of a fire hydrant. Now, I didn't know there was a fire hydrant there. I took photos of the site, and I appealed it, and my appeal was heard. But it clearly demonstrated that the markings on the road were not adequate. It wasn't visible from the parallel parking angle that I took. So, because of COVID, for whatever reasons, DFAS had not maintained the parking, making that clear to the fire hydrant being there. I also recently had a resident contact me who'd received he pulled into a parking bay that was a non-standing parking bay. There was nothing on the roadside that said it was a marking on the road. It was faded as well. Pulled over with his pregnant wife. He didn't get out the car. She ran into the shop, came back out. Anyway, he didn't know he got a parking ticket issued until it arrived in the mail a month later. There was no issued ticket to him on the day. There was no parking inspector. There was no ranger. There was nobody to say, excuse me, this is a no standing zone. You're standing, you need to move on. So whilst I support increasing penalties, we have to be fair in how we do it, and we need to make sure that our signage is clear so that people can make an educated decision about whether or not they are breaking the law or whether they are accidentally, in a genuine sense, pulling up and parking illegally for whatever reason because they genuinely didn't know they were doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? No other speakers. Your right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Bowman. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I've heard things about signage. I've heard things about admin processes. That's got nothing to do with this item. This is a proposed local law. We're not actually adopting the local law. We're going out to advertise. Councillors, 99.9% of our ratepayers will have nothing to worry about. For that 0.1%, who keep doing the wrong thing, who keep parking across our residents and ratepayers' driveways, perhaps a little small increase from $80 to $120 may be a little bit more of a deterrent. Councillors, it probably cost us $80 in administration costs to get to the $80 penalty, so let's perhaps get a little bit ahead of the game. I think Councillor Johnson actually pointed out that the $300 going to $450 is anyone that's done that. So look at the small items. They're going from 80 to 120. Let's get ahead. Let's not be in 8 years' time having our fees so low because they're out of date.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion. Those councillors in favour. I have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Jones, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Bowman, myself, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino and Councillor Henderson. I believe that is 8. I will just ask you to raise your hands again. I'll do a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The motion is passed. Did you get all the names? Thank you, Megan. Everyone else was against. Which takes us to the next item, councillors, item 7.3. I believe all the items left now are from...
Sorry, I just need to read out the purpose and effect. Now it's been resumed. Apologies.
Thank you. I've just been advised that if the council resolves to advertise the proposed local law, the presiding members to give notice of the meeting of the purpose and effect of the local parking law 2020 as follows. The purpose of this local law is to provide for the regulation, control and management of parking within the district, and the effect of this local law is to control parking throughout the district to ensure the safe, fair and equitable use of parking facilities under the care and control of the local government. Thank you. We now move to item 7.3, and I believe all the items on the agenda now are from the annual meeting of electors. So 7.3, request to amend local laws and policy retaining to extractive industries and clay. It's on page 936. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That council resolved to note the need for a review of the local planning policy POL-E11.2 clay extraction and program for this to be undertaken in 2022. Point 2, note the need for a review of the bylaw relating to the extractive industries and program for this to be undertaken following the review of the local planning policy POL-E11.2 clay extraction. 3, note that this work can be completed as part of the existing work program. No additional funds are required. 4, note that council is considering 0% change to budgets for the 22-23 budget. 5, record the reason for changing the officer's recommendation that council should be cognisant of the costs associated with items raised through the annual electors meeting, given that council is considering a 0% change for rates in 22-23.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? I can't see Councillor Prodovnik or Bowman. No one against? Then I declare that carried unanimously. It takes us to item 7.4. It's review policies relating to new major developments. It's on page 939 of your agenda. And Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I resolve that council resolve to 1, note that the issues raised in the motion are considered during the next annual review of local planning policies. 2, require that city staff promote to proponents of large-scale development projects the benefit of engaging and consulting with the community on such matters as a matter of best practice. 3, consider options to effect a more proactive regime of development compliance. 4, note that the work required to implement Part 1 and 2 can be implemented as part of the existing work program and no additional funds are required. Funding for Part 3 may be required through the engagement of the consultant and will be considered as part of the business planning for 23-24. 5, note that council is considering a 0% change to the rates for 22-23. 6, record the reason for changing in the officer's recommendations that council should be cognisant of the costs associated with the items raised through the annual electors meeting, given the council is considering 0% change for the rates of 22-23.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.5, motions 3, 4 and 18 relate to the annual meeting of electors. Floodplain and environmental issues, page 943. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I resolve that council resolve to 1, note the comments provided in the report in response to relevant motions 3 and 18 proposed at the City of Swan annual electors meeting held on the 8th of February 2022. Number 2, that the City will continue to make use of suitable mapping of remnant and native vegetation information considered appropriate to the level of influence in all the areas of the City. 3, that in the areas where the city has influence and or management control of the land, the city will continue to improve its mapping and on-site ecological understanding and adjust its management practice to suit. 4, note that to conduct a whole of city baseline study of the location, extent of the remnant and natural vegetation within the City of Swan as proposed in the motion carried at the annual electors meeting would require external expertise and likely cost in the realm of hundreds of thousands of dollars due to the sheer size of the City of Swan and the amount of remnant and native vegetation within its boundaries. 5, note that Council is considering 0% change to rates for 22-23. 6, note that the reason for changing the officer's recommendation is that Council should be cognisant of the costs associated with items raised at the annual electors meeting, given that the Council is considering 0% change to rates for 22-23.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? Do you wish to debate it? Okay. I'll take the question first. Thank you, Councillor Howlett.
Mr Mayor, through you, Mr Mayor, this is to Councillor Parry. It seems that the inclusion of item number 4 is in contrary to the motion because it appears to be in opposition or highlighting an opposition to conducting a whole baseline study of the wetlands. So I'm just curious as to what it's there for.
It's not an opposition, it's noting the financial implications of the decision being made. My motions, all of them have been raised in context of relating it back to a 0% change to the rates, and I think it's important for councillors to understand the cost benefits or the cost
I think
expenditure.
you've answered the question, Councillor Parry. There is opposition, so you'll have 3 minutes to start your debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. All these motions are in relation to the cost and the financial implications of decisions being made by council from an AEM perspective. I thought this is quite important in regards to this because we often receive the reports from staff in regards to this. I believe it's quite important for us to understand the full picture of a decision before we make it. I think that often we hear about cost savings and holding rates to zero and everything else like that, and it's important to have the AEM put through and that for the community to put through their motions. But it's also important for councils to fully understand the fact of what these costs are, so we can make an informed decision when we meet together in our draft financial budgets and to consider these facts on a case-by-case basis. I think that's quite prudent, and that's the reason why I raise all these motions. I know it takes time and all that stuff, I do get that. But in saying that, I think it's more important that we understand what we're trying to do first and make a rational decision from it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Congdon is the seconder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just perhaps ask councillors to refer to page 945 and in the 1, 2, 3, in the 4th paragraph down, it's important to consider tenure and management of this issue. The majority of land in the Mount Helena floodplain of the city's municipal boundary is owned and managed by state agencies. The fact affects the feasibility of the proposal of the City of Swan. So hence the reason by the motion by Councillor Parry, which I support.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. Vegetation loss. It's basically a motion about vegetation loss. It's just too expensive to go out there and map and itemise and know what kind of remnant vegetation we have. We can't do it now. My question is, if we can't do it now, when are we going to do it? Are we going to kick this?
Mayor. What's your point of order? Thank you.
3 clearly states to improve its mapping and on-site ecological understanding of justice management practice to suit. In other words, they are starting to do this already, and they're looking to update it. They have not.
Thank you. I'll uphold your point of order. If you look at item 3, Councillor Catalano, it says the city has influence and management control of land. The city will continue to improve its mapping and on-site ecological understanding to adjust its management practice to suit. So we continue your debate. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just talk about the whole of city baseline study of the location and extent of all remnant and native vegetation within the City of Swan, which is the point itemised in point 4. That's what I'm talking about. A baseline study. A baseline study is to know and find out and identify what you have. And yes, it does cost money to do these studies, but if you're not going to do them now, when are you going to do them? In 10 years' time, when these studies are even more expensive? Or are we going to wait until the vegetation no longer exists in these spaces? In which case, we've got the costs of trying to either remediate those floodplains? And do we know how much that's going to cost? Is that part of? Should that be part of our baseline study right now? What about trying to remediate biodiversity, habitat, and heat sink costs? I mean, it's all very well to talk about, we just can't afford to have green spaces. We just can't afford to identify our green spaces now. But I just want to know, when are we going to be able to afford to get started on greening our city? Because we're losing vegetation, native remnant vegetation, not only on floodplains, but elsewhere in the city at a rate of knots. And everybody knows it. It's a matter of fact. And it's absolutely irrelevant to this discussion as to who the owner of the particular floodplain is. You know, you can, if you want to, look at land that's just under the control of the city of Swan.
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
Or you can actually, for the benefit of all your future, well, current and future residents and ratepayers, look at all the remnant floodplain vegetation. Because every single ratepayer, every single resident, now and into the future, is going to benefit from a baseline study of the location and extent of all remnant and native vegetation within the city of Swan. Absolutely, ultimately, it is without a shadow of a doubt they are going to benefit from that. So what I'm saying is, I don't agree with point 4 being in this particular motion. I think costs are absolutely, you talk about costs now, that's going to be nothing to costs down in the future.
Thank you,
and that's the point I want to make. Thank you.
Speaker, question, Councillor Prodovnik.
Yes, it's a question from staff, and just to give us some clarification, from what I understand of the annual meeting of electors' motions, everything is being noted by staff, so there's nothing being particularly enacted. Is that correct? Because Councillor Catalano seems to be arguing for an enactment, but from what I understand, these motions are simply being noted. Is that correct?
Mr Mayor, we continue.
Sorry, Mr.
So through you, Mr Mayor, I mean, point 2 of the recommendation is that the City will continue to make use of the suitable mapping and remnant of the native vegetation information, so we are continuing work in that area.
But I guess what I'm saying is that the City was doing that anyway. It's not as if something new has been enacted. Am I seeing this wrong?
No, but...
Just because everything's being noted as opposed to any new enactment. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
And I feel part of Councillor Parry's motion, and he said it in the debate, to what financial cost, and that's why he's referred back to the fact that it is a consideration. You'll note that the first motion on page 943, Councillor Prodovnik, was to conduct a baseline study including private land or any other land within the City of Swan. Item 2 was to assess the loss of cumulative remnant and native vegetation due to proposed development expected to occur in the next 20 years. I just don't know how that would actually be feasible unless we had all the development applications before us, because we don't know where some of those may be. I've got no issue with identifying corridors and trying to get management. No, I'm trying to answer Councillor Prodovnik's question.
Well, they're just matters of opinion, actually. I don't think you can say that you know how it was done without studying it.
Well, I'm trying to answer Councillor Prodovnik's question as to why the City was noting a lot of those items, because I don't think a lot of them we can actually do at this point in time.
You don't know that for sure.
Just like you don't know it, Councillor Catalano. So I'll ask if there's any other speakers for or against the motion. Councillor Howlett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't agree with point 4 being put in there. The natural environment is our largest asset, and we came to understand that when we had a look at our asset management strategy or policy or whatever it was when I first got elected to council. And what we noticed there was like 45% of our natural environment, we still don't know what we have. That was clearly noted. So the natural environment is our largest asset, and therefore, yes, it is going to cost in the realm of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Assets aren't just roads, they aren't just buildings. The most invaluable asset we have is our natural environment, and so therefore I can't support this with item 4 in there, because yes, it will cost money, and unless we know what we've got before we get rid of it, we don't know how to save it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Henderson. Sorry, I've got Councillor Henderson first.
And I support the motion, Mr Mayor. I just want to cover a point about our most valuable asset. Actually, I think our community is our most valuable asset, at least ways they expect us to cover all aspects of the operation of the city, and that obviously would include the environment. The key thing here is that I've seen maps of tree plantings and established trees that are very detailed. I've seen mapping of the Bush Forever sites. We have detailed mapping to a great extent, and effectively staff are saying continue to make use of suitable mapping. Well, that's the point. We'll continue to do that. But when a motion starts to talk about private land, getting down to the level where someone might come and tell me whether or not I can cut down a tree that I might have planted that might not be a native, that's going too far, going way too far. And I think ultimately that's where the proposal is heading. Yep. And I don't accept that.
And what's your point of order, Councillor?
This isn't talking about chopping down trees in people's backyards. That's not what the motion's about entirely.
Well, that's your opinion, Councillor.
Including private and otherwise held tender, Mr Mayor, quite clear in the original motion. So the point is, just to finish, that what has been proposed is balanced. It has a good long-term outcome in terms of dealing with the remnant and native bushland, and will continue to ensure that we protect as much of it as we can. In respect of the state, we can't tell the state what to do. The state will tell us where to get off. And the bottom line is, maybe you should go and knock on the door.
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
Go and knock on the door of the Environment Minister and say, hey, we want to protect some trees and stop people cutting down trees on their own private land. So I do believe that we've got to have some balance here, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brodovnik, you indicated you want to speak. I'll see you, Councillor Bowman. You'll be next.
Yes, sorry if this sounds repetitive. Again, I just really want to make clear what I think I'm voting on. From what I understand, these motions now from the annual meeting of electors is noting the requests that have been made by those at the annual meeting of electors. It's noting the cost, and that's what Councillor Parry is doing. He's drawing attention to the cost of these actions, and that's the purpose, I suspect, of his contribution to these motions. We're also noting what the city is continuing to do, because the city's informing us that they are moving and doing things already, and that's what this is what I'm understanding. So we're not actually voting to enact these motions from the annual meeting of electors. We're commenting on them, we're noting them. And I'm saying this, and I'm seeking clarification on this, because I guess I don't want people to argue against its enactment when we're not proceeding to technically enact them. Am I correct in my understanding here?
Mr Mayor, Mr Vanderlyn, I want to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr Vanderlyn.
Mr Mayor, through you, I think it's important to realise that if we just look at the first motion there, the motion is to conduct a baseline study to assess the location extent of remnant vegetation, including private and otherwise held tenure. Then our comment in the report makes it clear that we believe that to do a baseline study on all land within the city will be a very costly exercise, and we don't control all that land. But what we then say in there is technology is, over the last few years, rapidly developed in this area, and we do get mapped information from Landgate. They've released LiDAR information from which we get mapping, and that is developing quite rapidly, very quickly. And then we're saying through that mapping, we already have some detailed maps around flood areas that's in our control and management. And then, so what we're essentially saying is we note what the request is, but we're saying we can only note that, and we cannot do a physical inspection to prepare that base study. We're saying let's go ahead and work on the information that's available through Landgate and enhance our mapping systems through that and concentrate on the land that we manage. Because you can spend a lot of money on private land and then you don't have any control over what happens on that private land. And remember that a lot of the flood plains within the city is actually owned in private ownership.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move an amendment that we delete recommendation 4.
Well, is that it's not acceptable to the mover or the seconder, so you can speak against the motion, Councillor Bowman, if you wish.
I second that.
Okay, I've got a seconded. Sorry, I've got a second to your amendment. So we'll now debate the amendment, which is the removal of point 4.
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor and councillors, it seems like again stuck on point 4. Point 4 is only noting, it's not an action item. Whether it's in or not makes no difference. So to make us get to the next item, I'm just trying to take the part out that we seem to be having a bit of an issue with. So hence the reason why I'm moving that.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson as the seconder. Speaker against the amendment.
It's quite funny that we often talk about draft budgets and everything else like that, yet as soon as you put in a motion that's a bit controversial, you want to take it away. I think it's quite important that we keep on noting all these motions here to make people fully aware of the implementation and the cost that we'll have of it. I think we shouldn't hide from this. Often councillors say we shouldn't hide, we shouldn't walk away, we shouldn't do anything in regards to that. But this clearly, the whole point of the motion, in particular point 4, is to clearly identify the costs of what actually could happen. I think that's quite important for the community to note that as well. Because when we do our financial analysis of our budget and everything else like that, and if some councils want to include it, I think it's quite important that we have a look at it first. That's why you've got to keep it in there. That's the only reason why it's in. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for the amendment. Any other speakers for or against the amendment? Councillor Bowman, your right to reply. Thank you.
Just quickly, I don't disagree with Councillor Parry. We don't know exactly what the costs are. Likely costs, things like that in a noting motion don't make a lot of sense to me. It is only a noting motion, so it makes no difference.
Okay, I'm going to put your amendment that makes no difference. Those in favour? I have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight, Councillor Richardson and Councillor Bowman. 6, the motion or the amendment is lost. We're back to the original motion. Are there any other speakers that haven't spoken to this item?
Question, please.
Question, Councillor Howlett.
If this, if Councillor Parry's motion doesn't get up, will it then go back to the
Officer's recommendation unless somebody else moves another motion?
Thank you.
Okay. Being no other speakers, Councillor Parry, your right to reply. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
I do enjoy when councillors say environment is our largest or most important asset. When you look at their ward priority listings and they highlight the following: Rainbow Park to be upgraded, Greenfield Park to be updated, local area traffic management study in Beach Barrow to be upgraded, lights at Amazon Drive and Dunview, local area traffic management study Bennett Springs, rewidening small parks, street beautification, particularly along GEH from Morrison Road intersection.
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Councillor?
The point of order is that that's their ideas that need to be done. There is no guarantee, unlike the Ballajura play space item which we discussed tonight, that any one of those are going to be funded in this forthcoming budget. So
Okay.
it's actually a
I'm gonna rule
furphy
you-
to start
you have
talking
no-
about it.
Have no point of order. Thank you, Councillor Catalano. You can continue your debate. Thank you, Councillor Parry.
Thank you. Footpath alongside southern side of Helena Street to Johnson Street. Road safety improvement of Vivash Ashby Terrace S-band.
I think we get the message.
The message is this. Councillors say this in live stream and basically say this is the most important thing, But when it comes to the crunch, councillors, you don't put it in there. You don't put it in there. Hypocritical, that is, councillors. That's all I've got to say. So let's put it to a vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Use of the word hypocritical I don't think is appropriate in the council chamber.
If you could withdraw the statement, thank you. Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion as it stands. Those in favour? I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Congredon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Bowman and Councillor Prodovnik. I make 9 with 5 against. You got all those names, thank you, Megan. Which takes us to the next item, which is item 5.6, Lower Helena River Restoration Subcommittee and Joint Working Party. It's on page 947. Councillor Parry.
Sorry, I got the wrong one. My apologies.
7.6.
Oh, sorry, 7.6. My apologies. I got the wrong page. That council resolved to request the mayor to write to the chair of the board of the Perth Natural Resources Management, requesting consideration be given to forming a subcommittee with members of the Helena River Alliance and the Wajak Regional Corporation, develop and implement a plan to restore and appropriately develop the Lower Helena River. The letter will also suggest consideration to be given to inviting the Shire of York to partner with the Perth NRM on the conservation and development of the Helena River, its floodplain and associated ecosystem. 2. Note that this work can be completed as part of the existing work program and no additional funds are required. 3. Note that the annual electors' motion are carried involving the establishment and running of these committees by the City of Swan will likely cost between $20,000 and $25,000 per year in staff time. Note that Council is considering a 0% change to the rates for 22-23. 5. Record the reason for changing the officer's recommendation is that Council should be cognisant of the costs associated with the items raised through the annual electors meeting, given that the Council is considering a 0% change to the rates in 22-23.
Thank you. Have a seconder.
What question?
I'll just see if I've got a seconder first. Councillor Henderson, what's your question, Councillor Johnson? Thank you.
Since it's important for Council to have a good understanding of the costs associated with items raised through the annual electors meeting, where did these costs come from?
Came from staff, Mr Mayor.
From staff was the reply. Any other questions? Is there anyone against the motion? You wish to debate it? Thank you. You've got 3 minutes for your debate. Thanks, Councillor Parry.
I just reiterate what I said last time. I think it's important for councillors to fully understand the costs of every single item that is being put through by the AEM. I consider it important to look through the budget in its totality. I think it's important that we continue to understand the total costs of programs that are suggested by our community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. As the seconder.
Nothing further to add, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Speaker against, Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. Look, there's obviously there's a pattern emerging to your amended motions away from what the electors actually voted on at the electors' meeting, and that is to, cost it up for them. And I really do feel that it's rather intimidatory, in fact, because it's like electors come to these meetings, they've got a real concern, and they want to raise it and they want something done about it. And then to go ahead and say, or to somehow suggest that it's the money that's the most important thing here. You've got to be aware of the money, you electors, when you ask for these things to be done. And I actually do feel that it shows a disrespect, in fact, for those electors who actually come to those meetings, those electors' meetings, and take the time unpaid to put those motions forward. In fact, they're a great help to us. And you know why they're a great help to us? Because they actually provide the motions for us, so we don't have to raise them ourselves. In fact, therefore, I don't have to put them on the wish list because the electors have done it for me. So, in fact, I'm not even being hypocritical about what I'm doing in council either. So I want to just reiterate that there's a pattern here, and it's somehow belittling the efforts that these electors have put forward to council for a better environment, for a sustainable environment, for a greener environment for them and their children and our children's children, because we need it. We need to do something about that now. And do you know what? It's all very well raising costs and saying, oh, everyone's got to be aware every time they ask for something how much it's going to cost. But right here tonight, we've moved motions for things to be done, and we don't know how much it's going to cost ratepayers. So I want to ask, who's been hypocritical now?
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Any other speakers for or against the motion? Councillor Howlett. Okay, I've just had a speaker against, so we'll take a speaker for the motion. Thank you, Councillor Pridovnik.
Sorry, are you talking to me?
I am.
The audio's shocking tonight. I hope you can hear me. Look, I'll keep this very quick. I actually appreciate the idea of cost. I think it's helpful. In this instance, I don't think the items here or the sums here are cost prohibitive. It's simply an estimation as well. It might be a lot less. It's just extra information. I think I take a very different view to this. I don't think it's an issue.
So are you speaking for or against the motion?
I was speaking for the motion. Is that clear?
Thank you. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Howlett, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Our residents actually listed the environment as their highest priority in the citywide survey that was conducted, not just councillors. So it is actually our residents who listed that. That came back from our citywide survey. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to fund a subcommittee that has been suggested by the community. I mean, it's their meeting, it was their motion, we're their council, and we should be taking direction from them on matters like this. My maths isn't that good, but 25,000 is about 5% of 4 million, if I'm correct, which is what we're going to spend on a man-made play space, hopefully with funding, in Ballajura. So, I can't support the motion with item number 3 in there.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Speakers against the motion. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I just want to make a comment on this because Councillor Parry's put in quite a lot of alternate motions relating to the annual meeting of electors. And one of the things that intrigued me at the annual meeting of electors is that at one point Councillor Parry left the room. And I also got, for quite some period of time actually, and I also recall afterwards someone telling me that Councillor Parry looked bored and disinterested. And yet all of a sudden we've got all these motions that appear to be somewhat contrary to what people want. So, Councillor, I'm just a bit puzzled by it all, to be honest.
Point of order, Mr Mayor, please.
Point of order. Thank you, Councillor Congdon.
I'm unaware of some third-hand information that Councillor Parry left the room because he was bored or disinterested. Maybe there are a whole bunch of guests in that room that were bored and disinterested as well. But and so I noticed some of those left the room as well, Councillor.
Thank you. I'll rule that you have no point of order. Thank you, Councillor Congdon. From memory, we were all wearing masks that night, so I fail to see how you could see someone's facial expression unless you're just going to look at their eyes. I think we just need to continue on, councillors. I'll ask again, are there any other speakers for or against the motions? Then briefly I'll enter the debate and I'll ask you to chair the meeting while I do. I think it's important that we have some idea of what any motion before council, whether it's come from a meeting of electors or from the chamber itself. Councillor Parry's gone to staff and they've got a cost estimation, and the reason he's put it in there is, and he's also followed up with that there is a consideration having a 0% rate increase this year. That may or may not be the case, but the rest of the motion, councillors, is the staff's recommendation. The staff recommended that the Mayor write to the Chair of the Board of the Perth National Resource Management requesting consideration of forming a subcommittee with members of the Helena River Alliance and the Whadjuk Regional Corporation, and also to include members from the Shire of York. So I think if we could get a subcommittee going that's not paid for by the City of Swan, it may be said that the City of Swan may want to influence that subcommittee. So if it's done completely independently, outside the control of the City of Swan, I see that as a good thing, and that's why I support the motion. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes for your right to reply. Thank you, Councillor Parry.
I think that it's quite funny that people raise intimidation and disrespect when all I'm trying to do is provide costing for it. Isn't that quite ironic that when we often ask for an idea, what's the next question that we often ask Jim, or Mr. Carden, sorry, is how much is it going to cost? I think it's quite important that we get this information. And Councillor Johnson, if you think I'm disinterested sometimes, I don't think so, Councillor. I actually pay attention to a lot of the meetings, and you know that too. I don't think that's a very fair comment at all, but that's by the by. And also I'd like to add as well that out of a residence of 162,000 people that live in the City of Swan, only 29 shown up, and none of them are from my local area as well. So I like to add that sometimes I think that there is a little bit of a slant when it comes to the AEM meetings, and certain people do attend that have a pretty big tendency in certain things.
Point of order.
Your point of order, Councillor Catalano.
It's people who turn up to the electors' meeting are people who turn up.
Yes.
You cannot say there's a slant. Everybody equally has an opportunity from throughout the City of Swan to turn up to that electors' meeting.
Thank
it's
you.
completely
I'm going
irrelevant.
to uphold your point of order. The annual meeting of electors is open to every resident of the City of Swan, Councillor Parry. So perhaps those comments were not needed or appropriate. So I ask you to continue your debate. Thank you.
And I sincerely think that it's more important that we completely understand the totality of our actions that we may undertake as well. I think that's the most important step in anything we do. And as you see here, I'm not rejecting the motion. I'm not doing that at all. I'm just trying to point out how much things are costing. I think that's very fair and relevant to what we do as councillors. I know that financial stuff sometimes is not sexy or anything else like that, but it is important. We need to know how much things cost.
Point of order. Point of order. Point of order.
What's your point of order, Councillor?
I mean, don't. There's a intimation that some councillors, including myself, I imagine, because I'm opposed to this motion, think that finances aren't important. And actually, that's incorrect. I don't think you can say that councillors here don't think that finances are important. It's not a statement you can make.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. This time I'm going to rule that you have no point of order. If you can continue your debate, thank you, Councillor Parry. And if we can sum it up as quickly as you can, and we've still got a few more items to get through.
Well, out of respect to the council, just to not bore anyone and not mislead anyone, I'd just like to put it to a vote. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The motion's before us, councillors. Those in favour, I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Congerton, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Prodovnik and Councillor Bowman. I make that 9, and the other 5 are against. Did you get all the names? Thank you, Megan. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to the next item, item 7.7. It's Toohey Gardens. It's in page 950. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My motion, Mr Mayor, is that Council resolve to note that Toohey Gardens was a Midland park from 1937 to 2001. Since 2001, it has been in Metropolitan Redevelopment Authority and Development WA ownership and has been fenced off and derelict for 22 years. 2. Add the restoration of Toohey Gardens to the City of Swan advocacy priority list, assuming we still have one. And 3. Record the reason for changing the officer recommendation.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
What's your point of order,
The
Councillor?
commentary in relation to if we still have one.
I think Councillor Johnson knows we do have one.
Thank you, and he should
So
retract that.
If you could just read out your motion as
Thanks, Mr.
stated,
Mayor.
Councillor
Mr.
Johnson,
Mayor.
without any extra in, would be appreciated.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just trying to make it more interesting for everybody. We've had a series of quite boring...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
What's your point of order, Councillor Congdon?
I'm not so sure that the commentary is needed to be more interesting than it currently is, and I don't know why you throw that into the conversation.
Yes, thank you,
Yes,
Councillor
I
Congdon.
apologise, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, and I accept your apology, as does Council. If you could just read your motion as written. Thank you.
Can't remember where I got to, Mr Mayor.
You got priority list. You're up to
All right, I
item
got
3.
to priority list. Up to point 3. 3. Record the reason for changing the officer recommendation is that the community have long sought the restoration of Toohey Gardens as a park in city ownership.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Knight. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare it carried unanimously, and we'll add it to the priority list. Thank you very much. Item 7.8, Heritage Resourcing and Proposal designate Midland as a heritage precinct on page 955. Councillor Howlett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So my motion is is that the Council resolve to 1. Request staff prepare a report to Council showing the budget implications between engaging a heritage consultant on an as-required basis and employing a suitably qualified heritage officer in either a part-time or full-time capacity. 2. Consider the establishment of Midland as a heritage precinct subsequent to the scheduled review of the local heritage survey, which is to commence in 2022-23. And 3. Record the change. The reason for changing the officer's recommendation is to give clear financial implications between engaging a heritage consultant as required and recruiting a suitably qualified heritage officer to staff.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson. Is there anyone against? I can't see you, Councillor Bowman. No, now I can. Thank you. Being no one against, I declare that carried, which takes us to item 7.9, North-South Arterial Industrial Freight Route through Midland and Lloyd Streets on page 959. And you have a motion, Councillor Johnson?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to support the motion for the City of Swan to reject the North-South Arterial Industrial Freight Route through the centre of Midland, proposed in August 2020 local planning strategy, and retain responsibility for Lloyd Street. 2. Record the reason for changing the office of recommendation is Lloyd Street as a north-south arterial industrial freight route through Midland will adversely affect the amenity of residents of each of the roads.
Thank you. I'm just going to make sure that it's up on the board and give everyone the opportunity. I'll give them 2 minutes to read and ask any questions if they need to.
Mr Mayor, can I ask a question?
Councillor Bowman.
Maybe it's just because I'm not at the meeting, but my run sheet said it was to arrive at the meeting. Why didn't we get this beforehand?
Councillor Johnson.
Well, Mr Mayor, I asked in part 1 of the meeting how it was that some councillors' motions just seemed to appear from nowhere when I've been under the impression for some years that I had to give at least 2 days' notice of an alternate motion. So I decided to test the possibility of putting in one at the last minute. As it happens, Councillor Bowman, you did get notification of it because, as you can see at the bottom there, it's exactly the same as the proposed motion by Councillor Catalano.
Fine. So it will be provided at the meeting, just that we all have to have the opportunity of reading it and understanding it and then ask any questions. So if I can ask that the motion be put back on the screen. Thank you. So am I reading that properly, Councillor Johnson? You're saying support the motion for support the motion. It's just been taken out. That's why I just wanted to... Well, that's how it was on the whiteboard until I asked the question. Thank you. I'll ask if there's a seconder. Councillor Knight. Is there anyone against? There is. You wish to debate it? Councillor Henderson.
Councillor Bowman was against.
Do you have your hand up against, Councillor Bowman?
Yeah, I was against.
Do you wish to debate it?
No, I think we've had 3 months of debate.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. Those in favour of the motion. I have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight and Councillor Richardson. That is 5. The motion fails. All other councillors were against. I need a motion, councillors, and Councillor Parry, you've got the next motion.
I'll withdraw my motion too, Mr Mayor.
You're going to withdraw your motion. Thank you. Councillor Catalano.
My motion was the same as...
We've just debated it.
Councillor Johnson was refused.
So is this...
recommendation, we've just debated that because that was Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Well, I still need a motion, councillors.
So there's no recommendation.
Move the officer's recommendation. Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone against? Do you wish to debate it? Thank you. Councillor Parry, you can start your debate. Thank you.
I think we had enough tonight. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson is the seconder. Thank you. Councillor Catalano speaking against.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think we owe it to electors to actually debate their motions for good reason. I support the electors' motion to reject Lloyd Street as a north-south arterial freight route through the centre of Midland, and so I won't support the officer's recommendation. The officer's report says that it's inaccurate to say that Lloyd Street is identified as a freight route, yet the city's local planning strategy, page 50, does mention Lloyd Street extension in the context of a road and freight route. So there's already some confusion. Lloyd Street cannot be a future freight route, whether industrial or not, and there's good reason for that. So let's just reject the idea of it being an industrial freight route, and there's good reasons for that. We've already got a north-south route, and it's called Roe Highway. That's the freeway to take freight traffic north and south. That's where traffic is supposed to flow, through traffic is supposed to use and not come through the town centre. That's why freeways are built. So freight traffic and flow-through traffic, does not need to go down Lloyd Street because Lloyd Street is effectively a residential street. And people who live in residential streets, because on either side of Lloyd Street are residential areas, because people who live in those areas, they need quiet enjoyment of their residential areas to thrive. And that's so that they're kept healthy in mind and free from smog, pollution and noise. Healthy people are happy and productive people, and that's what we support in this city. It's basic urban planning 101. That's why they built Roe Highway. That's why Lloyd Street, one of the reasons why Lloyd Street cannot be a major arterial route. And then it just doesn't make sense. How many intersections do we have on Lloyd Street? We've got Clayton Street, we've got Grayson Highway, we've got Shopping Centre, we've got Morrison Road, we've got 2J Road, yes. Now, if that's a major through route or traffic route, how are those intersections going to be managed? How are trucks going to go down a road that's got at least five intersections? Intersections, I might add, at Grayson Highway and Clayton Street, that are just going to be completely and utterly log-jammed. I mean, they already are. No self-respecting truck driver or an owner of a trucking business is going to get their trucks or take their trucks down there because they're going to be stuck in traffic more than they're going to move. It's not going to be a freight route, and it shouldn't be a route for flow-through traffic either. That's what row highway's for. It's common sense. It made common sense to me when the elector proposed this, and I cannot see why we can't change it right now and get on with making that the kind of residential, or should I say the kind of route that traffic into Midland, that stays in Midland, that for shopping, for people who shop, for people who are working in Midland. That's the kind of road that Lloyd Street is for. It is not a major arterial road. That is such an old plan. We've got Roe Highway, and we should use Roe Highway for freight traffic and for through traffic. I wonder if the whole idea of Lloyd Street as a through traffic was just a justification back, it could be 50, 60 years ago for, some sort of justification for the Lloyd Street Bridge to be built.
1 minute left.
So it's an old plan. It's obviously never, ever going to happen. There's too many intersections. It's a residential area. And we've actually got the infrastructure, the road infrastructure already to take freight traffic. And no self-respecting truck driver is going to take his truck down Lloyd Street. There's no room to modify those intersections so that truck drivers and through traffic won't be stuck at traffic lights for hours on end. Come on, let's just support the elector's motion this once and get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? Thank you. Councillor Howlett.
I'll make it brief as well. We were provided with the Jacobs traffic report after we passed the Lloyd Street Bridge motion a couple of meetings ago, and all of the Lloyd Street intersections are graded as an F. F is the lowest, the worst rating possible, and we haven't even built this extension yet, and we've got Fs everywhere. This road is confused, the extension's confused, but remove the freight away from it. It is designed then to be access to the Midland Health Campus and into the shopping centre and to drive business into Midland. Well, if that's the case, let's keep it as a local road. Let's manage it. Let's keep it slow and a nice flow and completely stop any future of it being a major freight arterial by reclaiming this road.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just speaking up on behalf of the residents of the Midland Guildford ward through which Lloyd Street travels. Councillors, the motion is not rejecting the concept of Lloyd Street as a road going north to south. What the electors wanted was to reject the concept of an industrial freight route through the city. That's what's being rejected here. So it's surprising that the officer's recommendation doesn't support that, because surely we don't want an industrial freight route going right through the heart of Midland. So, councillors, it's entirely in support of the residents of electors, residents and ratepayers of the City of Swan, and particularly those living in the Midland Guildford ward, to be opposed to this, because fairly obviously the interests of the industrial freight industry are supported by Roe Highway. So it's all entirely in line with what we propose. What we're arguing for is entirely in line with existing planning. So please reject this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, do you have your hand raised? You wish to enter the debate?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor. And I was trying to look at Councillor Parry's motions to see if he had the figures in there, but it's figures that he hasn't got. Retain responsibility for Lloyd Street. How much does that cost the city?
Sorry, I missed that question. If you could repeat it.
If we were to retain responsibility for Lloyd Street, what would the cost be?
Mr. Coaten, can you answer that or not?
No, I don't have those figures to hand. But if you looked at over the whole of life costs, it would obviously be a significant amount in terms of the renewal costs and the ongoing maintenance. Yes, it would be significant, but I don't have those figures to hand.
Thank you. And there are some figures in point 2 of Councillor Parry's proposed motion, but he decided not to continue with that. Councillor Bowman.
Yeah, it was fine, Mr Mayor. I just saw the cost of the traffic modelling in the report that might have been included. It wasn't included in the report, councillors. I, as you probably gathered, I'm always for giving roads to main roads. It reduces the ongoing cost to our ratepayers. So therefore, I would be in favour of retaining responsibility for Lloyd Street.
Yes, thank you. And any other speakers for or against? Being no other speakers, I'll enter the debate and ask the Deputy Mayor to take over. I don't... I support the officer's recommendation, and it looks a little bit double Dutch if you read the last few words. It says, and retain responsibility for Lloyd Street, where they're actually saying to reject that so we don't retain responsibility, because we've already written to the Minister asking her to take control of Lloyd Street. So this motion put up through the annual meeting of electors would be contrary to a previous decision of council. It would add untold cost to the city. So I support the officer's recommendation. Your right of reply. Thank you. Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation. I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Congerton, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Podovnik and Councillor Bowman, which is 9. The other 5 are against. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to the next item. It's item 710, Tree Policy Protection Policy. Councillor Parry.
In the interest of time, Mr Mayor, I recommend that we do an en bloc vote for 710, 711, 712, 713. The reason why is because of the fact that there is no additional costs or funds are required to do these motions. So I ask for an en bloc vote, Mr Mayor.
Well, I'll have to first of all get a seconder. Seconded Councillor Congerton. Councillor, if you can just have a look at those items, and can we deal with them en bloc, or do you want to debate them individually? Councillor Parry, can you just indicate, is it adopting the officer's recommendation just with your...
All I'm saying is basically there is all that staff are saying there are no additional funds required. That's all it says. So there are no implications.
Okay.
710 to 713. Keep up with the reading, Councillor Johnson.
So it's the officer's recommendation with a point 3 and 4 in most of them, saying there's no additional costs required. I'll ask again, is there anyone against the en bloc vote of those agenda items? Then I'll put them as en bloc. So those councillors in favour. I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Congerton. I can't see Councillor Podovnik. It's unanimous. Thank you. That takes us through to Part C of the agenda, councillors. And item 1 was notices of which previous notice has been given. Item C 1.1, Councillor Kiley, proposed amendment. Councillor Kiley's not here, so that will fall away. Item C 1.2, Councillor Kiley, permanent signage, Midland Markets. Have you got a proposed amendment for that, Councillor Bowman? Well, in fact, if that falls away because we have got no notice of motion, so the amendment falls away. Thank you. Item C 1.3, Councillor Kiley, Henley Brook Avenue Extension, page 984. There's an indication, Councillor Zanino, that you're going to move this motion. Is that correct? No. Then that item falls away. No, you can't, unfortunately. It's a notice of motion. So you don't have to leave the room, Councillor Henderson. That notice falls away, as does item C 1.6, alignment of Workshops Avenue. So the next item, part 2, is notice of motions for consideration at following meeting if given during this meeting. Councillors, do I have any notices of motion for the May meeting? Thank you. Councillor Zanino. Notice of motion, I think if you can just give us a topic heading.
It's in relation to the Boulognese Drive access track in Brigadoon, and that's sitting with me. And apologies, I haven't got round to writing it, but I will do it as soon as I get to it.
Thank you. So Boulognese Drive in Brigadoon. So that'll be noted. If you can get the details into the minute clerk as soon as possible. No others, councillors?
I think I've got 2 notice of motions already in with staff.
Yep, that'll be fine. I believe we're done for the night, councillors. I'd like to thank you for your cooperation. I think the 3-minute time limit has been quite successful for the last 2 meetings. Perhaps it's something we can consider using in the future. And as I said at the beginning of the night, may I take this opportunity to wish you and your families a happy but above all a safe Easter holiday period. And I declare the meeting closed. I don't want to be opening the meeting. Close the meeting at 9:50, and thank you all for your attendance, and particularly those